Right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our monthly overview and scrutiny meeting. And a particular welcome to those people who may be remotely viewing this through YouTube. And welcome to our guest. First item on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have had apologies from Councillor Humphrey, Councillor Scolding and Councillor Topgood.
Thank you very much. Item number 2, the previous minutes of the meeting held on 17th of January 2022. To confirm and sign those minutes, unless there are any comments which I'll receive, I will then sign those minutes. Are there any comments, please? I will sign those as a true and accurate record of what took place on that particular occasion. Thank you. Item number 3 is to report additional items for consideration, which the Chairman deems urgent by virtue of the special circumstances to be now specified, and I have none. Item 4, members to declare any interest in the local code of conduct in respect of any item to be discussed at the meeting. Are there any, please? No, thank you very much. We come to item 5, updates on previous actions. You all have sheets in front of you. I will take comments, questions, or updates as necessary. Councillor Scanlon.
Thank you very much, Chairman. With the ongoing sections of the programme, there's no end dates on when they're expected to be completed. I think it would be advantageous to both us and members of the public to know when those items propose to be completed.
Yep, I totally agree. Thank you for that. Perhaps. Councillor Mrs. Hay.
Sorry, I'm a little bit late, Chairman. Yes, under the watching brief planning, it says it's ongoing, but it looks to me as if it's been updated because it says at the bottom, Nick Harding's leaving Peterborough, and it also says that about us sharing a support manager. I'd just like to know what the situation is with Peterborough. Have they finally finished their review? And do we know exactly how we are standing now?
Thank you. That was a question we'll have to take on board. Dan, you may be answer.
Well, yeah, I can throw some weight behind that question, Councillor Hay. Throw some weight behind that answer. That question, Councillor Hay. Yeah, it's been confirmed that Nick Harding is thoroughly working his hours at Fenland District Council, and it's my belief he has nothing to do with Peterborough County Council regarding to planning whatsoever. And I think that took place in the first week in January that it came to us. Thank you.
Can I just come back on that?
You can do.
So what exactly is the arrangement now? Because it says we still have a support manager. And I just want to know what percentage of his time we have.
I think probably Dan can come in there, but if you want to come in there, Dan, but I think I know, I'm sure I know the answer, but please, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Yes, so as in terms of the arrangement with Peterborough, so there's no longer an arrangement with the head of service role, but there remains a service with regard to the shared support manager, which is shared on a 50-50 basis. That continues. And also as well, we've got the arrangement with Peterborough helping to deliver the new local plan.
That's for you, okay.
Thank you, Chair. Have we got an idea of the times that he is working here in Fenland, so that when we want to speak to him, if we ever do, we can do that? When we can let members know when he's available.
Yeah, can I take that away and come back in terms of, because it's Tuesday, Wednesday, and then depending on what's going on in the rest of the week, another half day, it's a 2.5 day post, but I will take that away in terms of how we can get that conveyed to members.
We don't normally have a presentation, we can go straight into questions and answers, because
Okay.
the only thing I will say is though that we've kept our word this time, and we keep giving you updates all the while to see what's going on. So you should be really up to date with it now, because I think the last one came out on Friday.
Yeah, it did. Indeed, we did. Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments on this particular item then, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I think in the past we've asked a question about what percentage of the commercial collections is actually recycled. Now, in the report, it deals with recycling elements of the blue bin and so on, which, in fact, I think are showing some fairly good figures. But do we actually recycle any of the business collection and stuff at all? And if so, have we got any similar figures to the blue bin?
Yes, we do recycle. We recycle everything from that and from commercial ones as well. When we go and collect it, we recycle it, and then the rest is taken away to other places that do their own recycling of what we can't do.
So
The percentage
is that recycling
percentage-wise, I haven't got it.
quantity included in the figures that are shown in here with the blue bin, or is it additional to?
No, it's additional to, so we'll give you that. I don't know that offhand.
I can't hear you, sorry.
I don't know that one offhand, so we'll get the figures to you on that. It's a Mushi-eye figure to all the other things we're talking about.
Because obviously that would be quite interesting to see, you know, if businesses are, shall I say, playing their part. Thank you.
It would.
Councillor Mrs. Hay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On page 36 of the report, under SELP 11, there's no RAG rating. I'm presuming that's because the cumulative performance at the time this report was written, it's got to be confirmed. Do we know at this moment in time what that is? Can I ask then when it is available, if you could let us have notice?
We
of
certainly
that?
can do, yes. It's one of the things that we don't, customer satisfaction, we don't get it straight away. So it's
Appreciate that.
probably one meeting we have with you and it will be there, and the next meeting it won't. So it's one of those things. But we will get the figures out too.
Yeah, Councillor Ewing, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I was asked by a member of the public, and you may have to go away to get the answer to this one. Is there any charge for a green bin being provided to somebody that moves freshly into a property and there's no green bin there? £80 was mentioned to me. I'm sorry to spend that on you.
The bins actually belong to the properties. So you hope that when people move out, that they leave the bins there for the next person. It doesn't always happen, so we then have to supply a bin, which the person then will have to pay for.
The new occupants?
Yes, the new occupants have to pay for that bin. It's just the same as if you move into a brand new house, you have to pay for all the bins to go into a brand new house. So they do that one because somebody, unfortunately, has taken it away. You can't always say it's the person who's lived there. It might have been taken by somebody else next door, somewhere along the line or along the road. We can't actually pinpoint who has taken it. So we have to supply another one, and that person has to pay for the new one.
Thank you for that. I'll be the bearer of glad tidings.
Councillor Scout.
Thank you very much. First thing, I have to commend the environmental services on their prompt action. I had an incident and it was responded to in double time and with a very satisfactory conclusion to it. So we've got to thank the environmental people for their actions in that case.
Councillor Wicks, please.
I notice in your report that you're rolling out, shall we say, street collections for both normal waste and recycle waste. How is the rollout of these bins going within the area, or are you just targeting a certain, shall we say, pilot area? The on street bins, you've got now a general waste and a recycled waste as part of the
we're virtually finished the rollout for all of them now, for the normal bins and the double bins, the recycle bins. We have about, I think it's about 50 left, 54 left at the moment to put out, and the rest of the other 150 are already out. And that this goes through the town centres, village centres, and also the cemeteries as well, some of the cemeteries. Parks.
Are they providing, should we say, a good opportunity for recycling in the locations that you put them?
Well, yes, because they are mostly through the high street. So yes, they're getting full most days, which is good. The recycling, it still goes ahead on the ordinary bins as there, because we're recycling themselves. But if they can put them in the proper bin itself, it doesn't take so much recycling. It's all there together. Okay.
Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I've raised this over a number of years. It's just regarding the recycling rates in Fenland. I think last year you said that we were doing well compared to our peers. Can you give us an update on where you think we are now?
I think we're the same as what we were before. We're well above shooting well above our weight with that sort of thing. What you will find is that it works out at different times. Can you just repeat that for a moment?
Well, it's just regarding the recycling rates in Finland compared to, say, the rest of Cambridgeshire. I think you've said that in the past, we were better than anywhere else in Cambridgeshire.
Yeah. Yes, we still are better than anybody else in Cambridgeshire, and which we're quite proud of. And also, as you might have seen in the paper as well, that while this COVID has been on for 2 years, we haven't lost a day's collection at all, and which is, I think, is terrific. The men have been out. The ironic part of it is, though, now this last fortnight, because of COVID is coming in rife in Cambridge and Peterborough, we are now have more men of our service than we've had in the 2 years of COVID being in the last fortnight. And we're getting over that. We've got contingencies all over at the time to do these sort of things. We've even had officers going out driving the lorries, officers going out sweeping the roads and things like that. And well, what we're doing is, like at this moment, the brown bin rather is not being used so much. So we have one loader and we have 2 loaders and 1 driver. So we're taking 1 loader off each one because they're hardly working now because of weather. There's been nothing there. And we're using them to do the ordinary bins, so we keep it going. So we're actually doing very, very well, to be honest with you.
If I can come back. I'm concerned because I think you've given that answer over several years. I think in the report it gives a recycling rate of, I think 27% was the target. Now, it wasn't that long ago when we were reporting, I think that we had 52% recycling rate. And if you do a simple sort of search with the government's sort of website, DEFRA, around statistics and waste management, it's got us in the, I think, 40 to 40, 50%. And there are sites that actually compile the data for the whole of like local authorities and tell you what the recycling rates are. Now it has us down as, I think, 194th out of 338 in local authorities for recycling, but that rate is 40.3%. So it's different to what we're reporting on a regular basis to the cabinet and councillors and obviously the general public. But the other items or the other councils in Peterborough and Cambridgeshire are all above us in those tables. So it's at odds with what you are telling us, because I think, for example, the next highest one is Peterborough at 40.9%, and they're 185 out of 338 councils. And it goes up to, I think the highest is East Cambridgeshire District Council, which I know we did talk about a couple of years ago. They'd only just introduced their bins, but they at a rate of 56.6%. And now these are from official government sources, these figures. They're at odds with what you're reporting to us. And I'm concerned that we're not getting the proper picture here. Obviously, if the government's reporting these figures, we must be supplying that to them. Why is it that we are regularly reporting that we're at 27%, but when it comes to the overall statistics, we're actually saying it's 40%, but that's still well below what would appear to be the average and what we were collecting a few years ago?
Well, I will get you the answer to that one. I can't remember everything on that, but what is happening with it, it's taken at a certain time. A lot of these figures are, and at the moment, you two people that you mentioned, the two councils that you mentioned, the Peterborough Council, they've been in very bad books because they've given money back because they can't collect there. I don't know whether you saw the thing on the program this week. It's not a bit like it's looked on that program, you know, how good they are in doing it. They've been losing hand over fist in getting it. They've had to put so many people off and other problems as well there. And they say they have to give back money there. It's exactly the same in East Cambs, which is ironic because where Mark Matthews, our officer, he lives in East Cambs, and he's saying that he hasn't had it been emptied for 6 weeks there because they're not being able to do it. We, as I said to you earlier, we have not lost one day, and we do everything by the book. We do everything perfectly, and the figures that go in are our figures.
Yeah, I fully appreciate that. You know, the sort of environmental services collection in Finland has been doing a magnificent job, and they've carried on when a lot of other councils haven't. But the data I'm talking about is the overall performance for 2020-21, so it's obviously the previous year. That is the total figure over that year. But again, it's at odds with what we're actually reporting, because we're reporting that we've got a 27% recycling rate. I think if you go back probably 10 years, we used to have something like 52% we were reporting. So the figures that we are reporting are not consistent, particularly with what the information we're providing to the government. And actually in the overall league table, it's saying that Fenland isn't recycling as much as our neighbours in Cambridgeshire. And I think that's a point I've been trying to make, is that we need to look at ways to improve our recycling rates.
Say one thing, we're looking all the while at the best way we do our recycling rates. I will say that to you, but actually Dan will give you an answer to you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Booth. What I think would be helpful is to try and get an explanation for you of the different context to the statistics that you've just said from the different sources that you've got, so that then as overview and scrutiny, you can take an informed perspective on that. Is that okay if we take that away and bring that back to you?
Yes, certainly. I mean, it's the main site I've gone to is the government site, and there's a report there that sort of gives you a picture, and it shows that, you know, there's been no substantive change for Finland, and I think there's data tables behind that, and those data tables are used. I think the site that gives this sort of performance league is called Let's Recycle, So you can quite easily Google these things, and it's telling us something different to what's being reported in the portfolio holder report.
We'll get that explanation back to you, because there's different contexts in different how statistics are collected, so we can get that explanation for you.
Yeah, but I think that the point is these statistics are over a year, so they're the end of year figures. So.
Okay, Councillor Scanlon.
Thank you. The bane of every council's life, fly tipping. How are we progressing, and has there been a marked increase in fly tipping? And if so, what has been done to identify the perpetrators of fly tipping?
I'll say the last thing first. Identifying, yes, when we receive a fly tipping, we go to see it. We look in it, we actually search in it, and we search all the bags if it's in bags and pull them all about. And we're looking for invoices or names or things like that in there. And then we take it back and we see whether we can actually take them to court, or just give them a warning, or take them to court, or what they will do about it. But we actually do sift the whole lot to see if there is anything. I mean, fly tipping, there is fly tipping is up a little bit, but it's not so much. But it's what we call fly tipping is probably not what you think is fly tipping. If somebody leaves a bag, a Tesco's bag, with stuff in it on the road, that's called fly tipping when you pick it up. And that another one, when a whole lorry goes and tips it up, that's still called fly tipping. So you can see the difference in the size of the big things that we're doing. But we do the same with all of them. We are actually, I think we've got about 4 going through the courts now. The people we've found out the name, we've got the names, and they're going through now. Some of them are getting fines of £1,000, £1,500. That's what I'm.
Come back on that one, please.
You say you got back 4. How many successful prosecutions have we had in the past year? And I'm not going to go into the exact figures, because that's for them to deal with. And how many have we got ongoing?
Well, the 4 or 5 are the ones that are ongoing. The other ones, I don't know quite how many there have been, because some take so long. Some are probably last year that are just coming up for being done now. It does take a long time to do, and we have to be certain before we take them to court, because otherwise they can come back on us and it'll cost this council a lot of money. So we really have to be certain with it.
I think in fairness, there's probably another thing there that is what actually happens at court when they get there.
Yeah.
Which is out of the hands of.
Thank you, Chair. On page 7, Councillor Peter, there's an item here, respond to DEFRA waste resources strategy. And you say that the recap board, which I assume includes us, have considered the lengthy consultations, and a combined response has been submitted. DEFRA have now delayed their response to the consultations expected in spring 2022. Sounds a bit like how the NHS is going to catch up, doesn't it? Is there any idea when that the blue light will come out of DEFRA, especially as it seems to look at what appears to me to be the next and very important stage of recycling, which is extended producer responsibility, which I think I understand. The deposit return scheme, I suppose, this is bottles and so on, and collection consistency. I'm not too certain what that one is, but yeah, do we have any idea where when some of this is going to come out of on high after they've sorted out partying in number 10?
Yeah, certainly. I do know something about this one, because I actually am chairman of the recap board for the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So yeah, the one thing that is very annoying really to us, it does keep getting delayed. These are government things that are coming out, and DEFRA want to get on with the resource strategy, but they taking so long. They keep blaming COVID for it, but everybody blames COVID for everything, don't they, these days? But they do keep blaming it, and it keeps putting it back. I mean, you see 2022 there in spring. I wouldn't be a bit surprised that it'll go to autumn or something like that, and then probably next year. I mean, some of the things, the bigger things that the government are wanting us to do, like food waste and all that type of thing, some of these are going back to 2024, 2025 even now. They're actually pushing it back all the while, because the one thing that is a problem with it is when this was brought out, all these things were brought out, they don't realise what it costs the whole of the country to recycle and do. And because our brown bin, which is green waste, costs us, as you know, we don't make any profit out of it. We run it as a non-profit making business, but it's costing us £900,000 a year to do. You start multiplying that over about 86% of the councils that now charge for green waste over the country, and we're one of the smaller ones. The government is wondering now how we can pay for us to do it on ourselves, because it means every council has got to put the money in. So they're thinking about giving us the first year of it free, but then it will be up to us after that to do our own thing. But I've seen this before. They just do not think it out, and it's so big that it goes out and out in years. And I think, personally, I think this one will do as well. At recap, we're keeping a very, very close eye on it, and I mean a close eye on it, because there are all these different things that you mentioned. They're all coming in. The food waste, I think, will be the one that the government will really go to. But even that one, because they want us to collect food on the roadside, so that means separately. So that means everyone in the country has got to have another bin, because it's a separate bin to put the food waste into it. They're thinking about having electric vehicles because of the environment. The trouble is, you can have a refuse lorry now, which costs around about £275,000, but the electric ones cost 400. And there's no way that councils can just go into it. I mean, we've got about 13, 14 refuse vehicles. We can't just go into it and get 13, 14 electric ones. It's all done over a timed period. They're changed in over a time. So a lot of this going backwards, what you're talking about, is for all those reasons I've been talking about.
So are you, as the chairman, then actually putting pressure on our friends in DEFRA or anyone else who is of influence in DEFRA to try and, shall I say, improve the overall situation in a number of ways, of course?
We're putting pressure on DEFRA. We're putting pressure on the government, and we're putting pressure on to the Lords and the Commons in the government, because that's where it's getting sticky, because they're thinking about, oh, this is good, and now they're realising, no, it's not quite so good for us, because it's going to cost a lot of money. But we are keeping a pressure on them all the while. I can tell you that.
And presumably that includes the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff as well.
I have mentioned it to him, yes. Yes. Yes.
Councillor Booth, please.
The question I've got is regarding the street lighting. It's got Councillor French down as the portfolio holder, but so the question is really around the replacement stock in sort of parish and town council areas. Previously, it was reported it should have been completed by the end of December. We're now in February, and I understand that work's still ongoing. Do we have any update that can be provided regarding that? Can I ask why we don't have that portfolio holder here, or someone to be able to answer questions? Because that's the whole point of this session, isn't it?
Yep. He's obviously somewhere else engaged. That's the answer. But yeah, I'll take the point.
Yeah.
It can go on the action sheet for ongoing actions, yes. I think that's the best way to handle that one. Thank you. Councillor Ewart, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Mine was a question for Councillor French, I think. This is about CPE. On page 8 at the top there, it says a specialist contractor has been appointed. There are a number of authorities within this. How are these costs being paid? Is there a government grant for this? What's the sort of, how is it divvied out, and what's the cost to Fenland? And if it is the cost to Fenland, is it in the budget forthcoming?
I think I can answer that one. As part of the Growing Fenland money we had from CPCA, £100,000 per town was put into a pot for the CPE work. So I believe the funding's coming from that. But we can check with Councillor French and put it in the action log for you.
Hopefully that's what's happening. Thank you.
Councillor Scatman.
In view of the answer that's just been given, could the committee be given an update, a written update, so that we are aware of what the situation is concerning that?
Well, thank you for being here today, and thank you very much for the report, which is noted. I do feel that generally we should congratulate every single member of the team. I think many local authorities would be envious of you. Thank you very much indeed for your attendance today. Good. Yeah. Do you want that? No, keep going. Yeah, sorry, yes. Yeah, sorry, I didn't realise you had your hand up. Okay. Andy.
Right, I've got 2 or 3 questions. The first one relates to page 11 of community safety paperwork. And what I want to know is CSP funding. Originally, it came via the county council from central government. But once the PCC was created, it was then redirected through PCC. My question is, why haven't we received any money between April 2021 and December the 31st, 2021?
Thanks, Anne. The reason we didn't have any funding, because the funding was based on a year by year, this is before I took over the portfolio. It was based on a year by year funding agreement. So when the standing police and crime commissioner finished his term, the funding ended with him. So then they had the election, and then we had a new police and crime commissioner was reappointed. So the new police and crime commissioner, he did all his consultations. He had lots of meetings with councillors, officers, with lots of other people, and lots of other councils as well in the area, to decide what strategy he was going to take. And I did raise this with him about the CSP many times, and the funding that we'd, as I put it, we'd lost the funding, but we was told it was changing. So either way, we wasn't getting funding at the time. So then after the new police and crime commissioner had decided what his local plan would be, he set his new local plan out. He then came back to us and put an agreement in place to offer the new funding, which this time, instead of being over a yearly period, is now been set over a 3-yearly period, which is his term in office. So that is the reason why we didn't have the funding between that period of time.
So we didn't have the funding, so no work went on from FDC on this matter?
Oh, yes, we certainly did, yes.
In that case, why didn't we, once the new mayor had settled in, why didn't we insist that any funding agreement was backdated? Because we were carrying on the work, and surely the money that had come from central government was meant to come where the work was being carried out.
thanks for the question, because we made many representations on the funding to the Police Crime Commissioner prior to the previous Police Crime Commissioner prior to this new funding agreement that Councillor Lynn has just referred to. And that's essentially the point we made, Councillor Hay, in terms of exactly what you just said, because we felt that it's a partnership, it's a community safety partnership, it's not Fenland District Council. However, we have been able to fund, say, the funding started essentially this new funding agreement from January the 1st, and we were able to fund from some residual reserves of funding for community safety related projects for the gap in funding to cover that cost. But you are absolutely right in terms of what you said, and thankfully the new Police Crime Commissioner has agreed that there is a need to fund such partnership work in Fenland District, and obviously we're very pleased that the new Police Crime Commissioner decided to do that.
Following on from that then, obviously the Crime Commissioner is re-elected every 4 years. What, sorry, is it 3 years? I stand. 4 years. Probably when you spoke to him, he only had 3 years left. But it is 4 years. My main concern is, should it be a different person re-elected to be Police and Crime Commissioner? Are we going to go through this again where we lose funding basically for 9 months?
Yes, is the answer to that.
Then I would suggest we as a council need to be making representations to the Police and Crime Commissioner's office to ensure that this doesn't occur again, that funding is carried over when a new Police and Crime Commissioner takes office, so that it gives them time then to look at it in detail, whilst at the same time we are not penalised.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for it. Again, in terms of our budgetary planning, that is something in the year towards the back end of the next term. We need to be making those representations just as we did the last time. Unfortunately, we weren't persuasive enough, Councillor Hay, in terms of the previous arrangement, but what we will do is look at that as part of our budget planning, which is part of our medium-term financial strategy at that time. And I'm not sure, just on the election, it's something I need to check. It is 4 years, so it is a 4-year term, was it? Because there was a delay for a year because of COVID, and I don't know whether that's caused some of the confusion on the time.
Well, can I ask if, when it comes around again, we are again have funding held back, that we do make that known to the general public, because I think it's important that they know if we are being supported by the Police and Crime Commissioner, and if we're not, the reasons why.
Yeah, thank you for all those comments. That's quite all right. I think I'll introduce formally, if I may, item number 7, the Community Safety Partnership. To consider and note the performance of the partnership 2021-22 and the CCTV performance report for 2021. And for that, I'd welcome to the meeting Aaron Locke. Welcome, Aaron, from CCTV Monitoring, and Inspector Andy Morris. Welcome to you as well. We will now proceed with that. Yeah, I don't want to blunt your enthusiasm, but there we are. Okay.
No, thanks, Chair. The paperwork has been circulated. All the information has been given out. As you said, Andy Morris and Aaron have joined us today. We also have officers, so we're happy to ask any question.
Well, we'll let Councillor Mrs. Hay in again.
Thank you. On page 6 of your report, down near the bottom, it mentions sports clubs, and it says talk to football clubs linked to Polish schools. I wasn't aware we had any Polish schools.
Thank you for that question. There isn't a Polish school offering full-time education. There is a Saturday school for the Polish community, which is held at the Rosmini Centre. And there's a Facebook page which we can
Sorry,
send
I
out.
didn't quite hear that.
Apologies. There isn't a Polish school offering full-time education. There is a Saturday school for the Polish community, which is held at the Rosmini Centre, and there's a Facebook page which we can send out with the notes in terms of for this meeting. And there's a similar provision at Huntingdon, which is attended by residents from Chatteris and March. And again, there's another Facebook page there. Which page, Councillor? Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, I think that's something that is still to do, which is why it's aggravated red. And what we'll do is I'll come back to you with a timescale for when this is likely to be achieved. Just bear with, because I have got the answer to that question. And it's that is an oversight in terms of that reg writing, and I thought I did have the answer to it. I'll be brutally honest, Councillor. But what I will do is I will get those answers to you, because I think there were 3 elements that needed a reg rating that we need to get, and I can, if it does come across my notes, I will come back to you in this meeting. But if not, I'll come back to you. But it is an oversight in the report.
That's quite all right.
One last question.
Go.
Aaron, would you?
Yeah. Right, I think I'm live. Yeah, the number of cameras don't always relate to the number of incidents and arrests achieved, as you can probably see by the report. The incidents and arrests will be more to do with the environment that the cameras are located within, not about the number of cameras we have. We do have a high number of cameras in Chatteris, but we also have one of the lowest crime rates within the whole of the district within that particular town. If you compare that to the likes of Wiswich and March, which have a very prominent nighttime economy, which does lead to a number of arrests due to alcohol-related incidents. I'm sure my police colleague will join me in, confirming that. We don't have that similar number in Chatteris. We deal with a lot of, should we say, low-level ASB. We deal with a lot of vulnerable missing persons, which will not generate arrests. So we won't be seeing like for like due to the number of cameras. It doesn't mean you're not getting value for money. It just means we're dealing with a different different number of types of incidents, which will not lead to arrests because of the crime types that we're dealing with.
I appreciate what you're saying, but over the last year, there has been an instance of criminal damage at Lindsell's Walk and a great deal of ASB around the area. There has been numerous incidents of drug dealing, particularly around Wenny Wreck. So if you're saying it's because of where cameras are situated, whose responsibility is it to make sure that the cameras are in the right place to make sure they're most effective?
Okay, in relation to the ASB within the town centre, the CCTV team did a lot of work. I won't find any partner that was involved within that project that wouldn't agree with that. CCTV provided a lot of evidence to our police partners and to our own internal antisocial behaviour team to identify the perpetrators, to get them in and obviously educated. Those particular perpetrators, I don't believe there was a lot of arrests due to that because of the type of offences that they were involved in. Even though it had a high level of community impact, it weren't classable, as an arrest because of the age and obviously the type of offences. But the CCTV team did provide a lot of intel and a lot of evidence to actually get that nipped in the bud as quickly as we possibly could as a partnership. In relation to the locations of the cameras, it's, they cost a lot of money to install. The old cameras, how they were installed was, obviously they were in a dedicated column. They're not easy to redeploy. Our new way of approach is obviously to have redeployables or cameras that we can sort of pick and move. That's the new approach that we're going because technology is caught up. It allows us to do that. So hopefully in future going forward, we will be able to respond quite quickly to developing crime trends and move our cameras to areas of, new developing trends. That's the idea going forward. So going forward, that's a vision for us.
So who's going to have to pay for the cameras?
Well, that'll be a question we have to sort of discuss when these new areas are coming up. I'll give you an example. Peterborough, they have a new hotspot that we're working with at the moment, and we're looking at we are bringing in redeployable cameras for that particular crime trend, because we know that particular problem that we're dealing with is going to move. Once we put those cameras in, we're going to displace it. We're going to move it to another area. So what we will then do is move those cameras and follow. And that's the new approach that we're doing. So that's been funded by Peterborough City Council. And likewise, if we have similar in Fenland, that will be the same specification we will put forward for our partners to consider. So we will then be able to follow that particular crime trend.
Thank you for that. So I need to start lobbying Fenland to provide the funding.
When you get a particular problem, yes.
Yeah, I do concur with Councillor Mrs Hayes' concerns there, and thank you for the explanation of that. I looked at those figures, and in Whittlesea, for example, we have the least number of cameras, I think only half a dozen, but we have the highest rate of incidents and fines. And as you've identified, Aaron, I think that's because we have the cameras in the hotspots, which is very much, and I was concerned about the one in 93 at Chatteris. That did sort of stink out a sore thumb. So thank you for that explanation. Thank you.
Thank you. Now going to get on my hobby horse, my favourite subject, e-scooters. They are, by the words of some of your police officers, the Wild West. Extremely concerned, all the market towns that I've driven around, there are e-scooters everywhere. I know there is a scheme going on in Cambridge City where the legal ones are from a hire company, they are insured. CCTV can obviously spot these people driving around. We get quite a few down High Causeway, along the pavements, along the 605, no lights, no insurance, no protective clothing. What are the police actually doing about it? I know we read that there was somewhere the other day they stopped a load and confiscated them, but they are becoming very prevalent, and they're getting speeds up to 70 miles an hour. Make no bones about it. Some of these are quick, so we have to get on top of it.
Thank you, and thank you for your question. So if I put a little bit of context behind that, I fully understand where you're coming from. I was a neighbourhood sergeant in Peterborough in recent years in the city centre, and it was the bane of my team's life, and I absolutely get that. The challenge we have is that we're doing a lot of work with the retailers behind the scenes to make the retailers accountable to a certain degree, because they are illegal unless they're being ridden in a private place, not on a public road, then they are illegal. And the retailers are not doing anything to say this to people when they sell these scooters. So that's part of the educational piece of work that is going on behind the scenes. So we've got a team, and there's one or two specifically very proactive neighbourhood officers who focus a lot of their attention and a lot of their time on e-scooters, and almost adopt a zero tolerance approach to them. There's a fine balance, because some of these young people will quite simply not know that they are illegal. So there's the arm of the educational element of the younger people, but also the enforcement issue as well. And if it's proportionate that the officers are seizing these e-scooters, the problem you have then is when you're seizing these scooters is that takes the officer off the street to tackle other issues. So it's that ongoing balance. But I absolutely get that e-scooters are a problem. And to be frank, that problem is not going to go away, because more and more retailers are selling these e-scooters. So we have to find that balance of education and the punitive action. I do encourage the team to put what they're doing with e-scooters on social media. But again, the flip side of that is if they're putting a post on every single day about what they're doing with these scooters and the action they're taking, to some it will be the perception that all the local police are focusing on is e-scooters. So again, it's that balancing act of other priorities.
Yeah, Councillor Scott.
Can I make a suggestion on that? Most of the riders of these e-scooters are school children. Go into the schools and educate the schools, because I've seen them being ridden to Sir Harry Smith's in Whittlesea. No one's doing anything. And to date, I think there are 16 deaths and somewhere in the region of 500 injuries, some of them very serious. So I don't want that to increase. I want it to decrease.
And I absolutely take that point on board. We've got our Safer Schools officers who do just that type of thing. They formulate part of their talks to secondary school children around a number of factors, but e-scooters are in there. So we've got the Safer Schools teams, but we've now got, and I'll probably come on to it later on when I'm talking, the neighbourhood policing team in Finland is at full establishment now. So we've now got capacity to do a lot more proactive work around issues that are affecting the community. So now we've got officers in each market town who are going to be doing exactly that with the local schools, and that's part of my local plan as well. So that very much ties in with my way of thinking, and it's got to be done as well. And when these accidents are occurring, they're reportable accidents, and we are finding that people are being prosecuted as they would for any motoring offence as well. So I can get data to you about the number of prosecutions, the number of referrals, the number of educational programs people have been put on for the illegal use of e-scooters. I don't have the data to hand, but I'm really happy to provide that as well. Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Ewing, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 4 and 5 of the report, mention is made of the effect of COVID. And I suppose the effect of that in implementing your plans and your measures that you've got here. And also, what are you seeing out in the field regarding domestic violence? Is there an increase in it? Are you able to prevent it, or to challenge it, or to look at it? My second question will be about street drinking in Wisbech, where the figures have gone down. They're right down. They're shown right down there. Will you be able to build on that now that they're not there, and make a plan to stop it increasing going forward in Wisbech with drinking alcohol? Thank you.
If I come to your first point around domestic violence, there are a couple of significant pieces of work that are going on at the moment. The first is the violence against women strategy that the government have introduced, and we as a police force now have a team focusing on that, and that is around that's around a number of issues around spotting and identifying predatory nature, and educating hundreds and hundreds of professionals to recognise these signs. Around the domestic violence arm, for me as your neighbourhood inspector, I'll be honest with you, I can't give you those answers, because that is my team are not what I'd class as a response team, and they don't work in the protecting vulnerable people department. So that they're not responding to domestic incidents, they're focusing on issues that are in the police and crime plan and other organisational priorities. So I just can't provide you with that data to hand. But I can tell you that it is a force priority. So it's one of our operational priorities to reduce domestic violence. So I can absolutely guarantee you that as a force, we've introduced a vulnerability focused department that have a team specifically looking at domestic violence.
Well, just ask that officers or forums there, whose responsibility is it to take action? How do we look at this? Because we read in the newspapers and television of these cases and constantly saying it's a hidden thing, a lot out there. But how can we?
So maybe, sorry to interrupt you there, maybe I didn't articulate myself very well. It's absolutely a partnership, but a police responsibility to tackle domestic violence, 100%. What I was saying is that my team will not respond to 999 calls for emergency because we have other departments and other teams who respond to that. And we have specialist teams that have been introduced to the constabulary in the past 12 months. We've got, as I say, a vulnerability focused team that we have a protecting vulnerable people team. And now every domestic incident that a police officer goes to has to be reviewed and written off by a supervisor as well, by a sergeant. So domestic violence is absolutely a force priority and rightly so. But in terms of the data, whether the number is going down or up, that's information I just can't give to you at this moment in time.
Where is the link then between what you're saying and the work that the county are doing here with all these schemes that we've got going right through, the pages, got reams of it here? Where is the link there? How is that preventing? How is that helping people?
Yes, thank you for the question, Councillor Hewlett. So yeah, building on what Andy Morris has said, what we do is bring all the work together. So we get the evidence through to the local community safety partnership meets quarterly, and we ask the county-wide board about what help do you need in terms of, from a local perspective, when you see, you know, what does good look like for a good approach to tackling domestic abuse? What help do you need? And the actions, as you quite rightly said, it's set out in the action plan from page 56 onwards, set out the work that we're currently focusing on. I mean, one particular example from that to drill down on would be the DAHA accreditation, domestic abuse housing accreditation, and that's what we're doing at the minute. So our housing options team are being trained through that accreditation scheme to ensure any resident who presents as being a victim of domestic abuse, we deliver the best possible service to them, and to ensure that we deal with their cases appropriately and in best practice, essentially. And that's an accreditation that we're currently seeking to achieve. So that's a specific example.
Have you got a handle on of the volume, and are we making a difference? Can we see that anywhere? Have we got a record of that? Can you really tell us that's happening?
So there is statistics across which I'm sure I can go away and see what, in terms of trends. We did have a presentation, not in the last financial year actually, but in, I think, the one before that, during COVID, on familial domestic abuse. And in terms of the pinch points in Cambridgeshire, Fenland was highlighted as a pinch point in relation to that particular type of domestic abuse. So I'm sure, Councillor Hewlett, I can go away and come up with some sort of trends and bring that back for you.
And my other point about the street drinking, it seems to be gone down in the COVID period there. It's down now. What action are you going to take to keep it down?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Hewlett. To begin with, it has gone down. We're not sure how much is COVID, but during winter, obviously, it often goes down most years. But with the new Safer Wisbeach project that is being undertaken at the moment, that will be part of it, and the work will be ongoing in that to sort of address street drinking. I don't know if Andy wants to come in on that as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and just to add on to that, I've committed to implementing something called Operation Luskum, which is a successful model. Operation Luskum is a partnership approach to addressing the issues as to why people are on the streets, why they're begging, why they're drinking, why there's that level of antisocial behaviour. This is a model that I'm bringing with me from Peterborough, and it's proven to work. What happens is if somebody is caught drinking or committing antisocial behaviour, they're invited to a hub where there are a number of agencies who work together to ultimately provide the support for that person to stop them doing what they're doing. It's very much looking at the rehabilitative, reparative route before going down the punitive approach with these individuals. So there were 46 people on the scheme. Of those 46 in Peterborough, 4 received a criminal behaviour order. What I mean by that is that those 4 people did not want any help, did not accept any help, and were not prepared to take any help. So rightly so, that the right course of action was the punitive approach, and they received criminal behaviour orders which banned them from Peterborough city centre. That's a model that I'm looking to bring with me because it's proven it's worked, and actually it's effective in quite a short period of time. We get the right people around the table, and in this hub, I'd expect there to be very few issues of street drinking, begging and antisocial behaviour.
Last thing, well, yeah, it sounds as though you've got a good base to work from now, because it's a low base of homeless, it's a low base of street drinkers and that sort of thing. You've got less challenge there, or a different type of challenge to maintain that. Thank you.
Councillor Purser, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think my comments really is probably to Inspector there. Something that's actually concerned me for quite some time. And I'm going to call it antisocial driving. I've noticed at night time, when we go out and about these days, sort of late at night, the pubs close, etc., and there's a lot of people there who sort of had a few drinks and all the like you say, and then people start driving at night time. I'm sure March is not the only place, it's other towns as well, and people deliberately driving at far too fast through the towns. I think almost showing off in a funny sort of way. And my big concern is that I think they know that there's no police presence there to actually put a flea in their ear or to actually do anything to stop them whatsoever. My big concern is that one of these days, somebody's going to step off in the middle of the road, either get hurt or even worse, still get killed. And I wonder if you could actually do something, I think just a police presence there to show that they've been spotted. I mean, they drive through town so fast sometimes, you can't see the car numbers to actually report them or anything. If you did report them, it'd be too late by the time they've actually finished their little things. And I wonder if you could do something about it, please, to save lives.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing that to my attention. And that certainly fits in line with the priorities from the PCC plan and our Vision Zero plan as well in terms of the road safety partnership. I'll be really keen to get specific details of if that's occurring on a regular basis and where, because when you say it's too late, to a degree it might be there and then, but actually there are things retrospectively we can do. We can work with Aaron and the team, and actually if it's blatantly clear that somebody is committing a road traffic offence, I'm really happy with sending one of the team around the next day to go and speak with the registered owner to find out further detail, because there are retrospective pieces of legislation that we've got on our side to be able to do things like that. So what I would do is really encourage that reporting. If people are coming to you, I don't want them to think that it's a pointless task reporting it to the police. I'm more than happy to give my personal details out to anybody in your community who's got these concerns and who don't feel the police are doing anything, because I'm really happy to have those conversations with those people. And I think it's important to a degree that if they feel that we're not doing anything about it, it might be that we can't or we won't, but I'd rather give them that explanation, because I think that message sometimes is a lot easier to give over and give them an explanation, even if we do have to say no sometimes. So I'd be really, really keen for that.
There's 2 points that actually makes that, coming back on what you're saying there.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of people having reported it to me. I've actually seen it myself, and they go past so fast,
right?
You can't take the numbers. There are even cars that are not normally distinguishable, not the normal cars. They're basically almost like just showing off. And one day, as I say, they're going to kill somebody like that.
Yeah.
And I actually do really worry about it. I don't think my area is the only area it's actually happening in. I think it probably happens in a lot of different areas as well.
Yeah.
And I think basically, as I say, just having an officer there or a car there from time to time, and they spot that person, they spot that car there, and they realise that they've been, and I use the expression, clocked.
Yeah.
and all of a sudden they start sort of standing, because they're able to kill somebody one day.
Yeah, and thank you. And I think whilst I won't go into the politics of resources and the demand, what I will say is that actually the positive news I have is that from the start of January, the neighbourhood policing team is up to full establishment. So we have the capacity to actually really make inroads and start to do things. And I also think it's important that we share the success stories with you as well, where we have mitigated that risk and we have done things. So yeah, the team work a shift pattern where they work a period of probably 7 to 8 lates over a 3-week period, and they work 7 to 8 days, and they obviously have their rest days as well. So actually for me, that's a message I can feed back to say, let's really focus on these, because my challenge to my team would be if I said to you, what are the 5 priorities in the PCC plan, and what is Vision Zero, I'm sure I could catch one of them out, and actually that sits right in there. So I will take that on board for you. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your time.
Councillor Scarlett.
MVAS cameras. Whittlesea now has 12. Other towns have similar quantities, some more, some less. We produce quite a considerable amount of data from those. The data is forwarded to the police liaison officer from Hinchinbrook. We've had speeds on the A605 up to 107 mile an hour through Eastry. We need something done about it. And it's not just Whittlesea, it's all the areas, exactly what Councillor Peirce has just said. These are being caught. We don't get the registration numbers on MVAS cameras. We only get the speeds and the times. I accept that sometimes those speeds may be blue light vehicles, and I fully accept that. And the PCC is promising us action days where your crews come out with cameras and sit there and issue the necessary paperwork to the offending people. I'm glad to do so. I don't know whether you've actually seen any of the MVS camera data from Whittlesea. If you haven't, I will arrange for it to be sent to you so you can appraise it and take the appropriate action. I don't know what action you can take, but we can certainly get it to you.
Thank you. And I think my initial thought would be there is we could do some quick time analysis of the data to identify the key times and direct the teams to be working over that period of time. And one thing that perhaps I should have touched on before is now we're up to full establishment. The team, part of their initial training is induction is to receive the training, so they have the tools to do the jobs, to target speeding motorists, to understand the legislation around e-scooters. So they undertake a specific training program around neighbourhood policing, which other officers may not have. So now the team are trained up. I'd be really looking for to see some tangible results that I can share with you as well, because I think that's important. We will do what we can to help you with what we've got, is my message.
If you give us your details, we'll get the MVAS data to you.
Be my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Conlon, please.
Yes. Following on from Councillor Callum's comments, we had a meeting with the PCC some 3 or 4 months ago now, and although he did give us or donate us some MVAS cameras for primarily the A605 route, he did promise us some days of action on the A605, and he was Shona Mackenzie was with him. Matt Staten unfortunately wasn't at that meeting, Councillor Scanlon, and certainly I was there, Councillor Whitwell, and you were there, Chairman as well, I think. And he did promise us a couple of days of action. So probably could you like to chase that up to see where we are, because that has seemed to have fallen flat.
Before you answer, I was actually with the PCC yesterday at Ely Cathedral, and I did chase it up, and he said, yes, it is still in the diary to be done. So preempt on what you were probably going to do.
Thank you. I'll take a note of that. But I will find out when those days are. I'll be honest with you, I haven't had anything through to me with specific dates. It may have bypassed me to go to one of the neighbourhood sergeants, but I'd like to think I will be cited on it. So as soon as I have that information, I will tell you.
If I can just
Sorry, I think you said the councillors will be invited.
Yeah, to be present on the day of action, because that was what was promised to us.
Yeah.
With
I have no issues
Darryl.
with that.
Sorry?
I have no issues with that. I'll find you a tabard as well. So that's
Wonderful.
fine.
If you,
Yeah.
lovely. Thank you for that.
No
Lovely.
problem.
I think without belabouring the point, the thing is that Wiltshire Town Council spent a lot of money on these cameras. Our town clerk spends a lot of time in collating the information, and we can identify the hotspots. It's just really the end product of a little bit of support. So thank you for that. Yeah.
No problem. And I think that's not unreasonable.
Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chairman. I also wanted to raise the issue about road safety. I think on page 21, it indicates that the last 4 ONS scrutiny panels have raised about road safety. It hasn't been last 4 because I've been on this panel for quite a number of years and I raise it every opportunity I get. So I think that's probably a little bit disingenuous just say it's 4 years. But my question broadly is, you've obviously heard a lot of concern about road safety from councillors here today, but with the action plan, are you effectively saying that road safety is now the remit of community groups? Because that's the only action that I can see on the action plan regarding road safety. And the other point I want to raise is, I think last year it was put on the action plan, not as a priority, but as a focus area. It seems to have dropped off as a focus area as well, which I have to say is really disappointing.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Booth, for the question. So, road safety partnership, I think, officer from Cambridge County Council came, I think, a year ago, to this partnership, to the Vision Zero strategy that was being launched around that time. What we've asked of the road safety partnership is where do you need support? So it's a county-wide partnership. Where do you need support from a community safety partnership perspective? And a lot of the focus has been around they need help trying on the volunteering side in relation to encouraging volunteers to get things involved like speed watching and things like that. And so that has been our focus. But we also, I think, not sure where back, but I'm pretty sure in the documentation there's reference that we said to the road safety partnership, if there's a gap from a Fenland perspective where you need support from delivering your Vision Zero, please come back to the road to community safety partnership to see how the partnership can help fill that gap, and which they said they're very happy to do and come back to. So and I guess it's something that we could take away is if you remain concerned, because I think you did show that we have emphasised overview and scrutiny's concern back to the road safety partnership in relation to road safety in the Fenland context. If this remains of a real concern for you as a committee, I'm sure they will be happy to come back and say what progress they've been doing as the Vision Zero partnership, if that's something that you would like. I can make that representation anyway for that, if that's of interest to the committee.
Yeah, I would certainly welcome that. And I think it's not only just this committee, it is the communities we represent that have it as a real issue, particularly the rural villages. Yeah, I think I've quoted numerous occasions before. I think Fenland was in the top 3 for fatalities amongst young drivers. That data was collated by Break, the road safety charity. So it's an issue that needs to be addressed. Yeah, I work closely with one of the speed watch groups, and I have to say, even though we've had promise of more sort of police officers through the increased precepts over years, which has happened, I think, for about the last 3 or 4 years, the assistance we're getting from the police, unfortunately, their resources have been diverted to often more urgent things on the days when we're doing activities ourselves, which is disappointing. So it doesn't look like we're actually getting more police resource to help with some of these community-based issues where we are trying to actually sort of help out. Obviously, COVID hasn't helped. Constabulary did stop speed watch over a quite substantial period because of COVID safety issues and concerns. But we don't really seem to be moving any further forward, and I think it does need to be taken up as an urgent issue. I've always said it should be a priority, because if you speak to our communities, if you ask them what's the big issue, they'll say speeding, and it doesn't reflect in the community safety partnerships priorities. and I always say it should be.
Councillor Kane, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on this point about the road safety community partnerships and whether they make any bids for funding to actually get some physical works done. And the reason I ask that is this year, at the start of this year, there was £454,000 in the county council bank account that's specifically allocated to new scheme development. And by the end of April of this coming year, they predicted that they would have spent absolutely zero of that, not one penny, not £1. And we was quite disgusted by this and said, how is that possible? And the response we got was quite confusing, because they said because the combined authority and the Greater Cambridge Partnership hasn't come forward with any new schemes, and we haven't had any use for the money. Well, that for me is a bit of a red herring, because when the combined authority and the Greater Cambridge Partnership bring forward new schemes, like we want to dual the A47, they have to pay all the costs separately. So they say to the county council, can you do this work? And here's the money for it. So there's no way that the new scheme development money, which was county council money, would have been used for that anyway. And it did say, well, why on earth, if you're blaming them, you haven't used it for safety measures, because the county council is responsible for highway safety. There's no bones about that. Whilst we've all got a part to play, the county council is responsible for highway safety. We never got a response back. They've diverted some of the money elsewhere now, but not one penny of £454,000 is going to get spent on new scheme development in an entire year. It started with 454k, it's ending with 454k. So we made a request saying, if you've got no ideas for it, you're keen on your 20-mile-per-hour idea. I think if it's the right scheme in the right area and people want it, go ahead. They voted that down and they didn't spend the money on new scheme development. So quite straightforward question. Do you put in bids for funding for schemes that should be? And if you do, I think you've got some questions to ask them why they haven't come up with some money when a new scheme development sat there with absolutely nothing being spent against it. Thank you.
Just one for you, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Count, for the question. So that's something, as I say, from the context of how our relationship with the county-wide partnership for road safety, our relationship has been, we ask that partnership where they need support, where there's gaps in the local area. So what we can do is take back your feedback, really helpful feedback in terms of asking that partnership about that funding that you've just highlighted, and is there plans for Fenland in relation to that, which fits in with their Vision Zero action plan, which they've approved through their strategy and that development. So that's something, again, we can take away.
Thank you very much. I'd appreciate seeing their new iteration of a new answer on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wicks, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As we're coming out of COVID and the opportunities for community engagement, we've already heard you're going into the senior schools, but what activity are you conducting in primary schools? I ask this question because many years ago, when I went into our local primary school, the children identified 3 things they didn't like about the village. And the number 1 was speeding. To that, they organised their own school speeding watch with the assistance of the chief inspector, who was resident of March then. It lasted 2 years before other priorities took the police away from that activity. Now, the young children are very passionate about the environment and what's going on. So I do ask, where is the primary school engagement going to come from? That's the first part. As there are a number of, shall we say, youth clubs, activities going on and being formed, particularly within Whittlesea, what engagement with the youth are you having at these clubs and events within the whole of the Fenland area? Because I don't think Whittlesea is unique in this development of the youth activities. So we'll leave that one there.
Thank you. And so that's a really good question, because I look at the ongoing challenges that we face as I have to juggle the PCC priorities, which are ultimately the local priorities here versus the internal organisational priorities, because they are different. So the team balance those. And I won't hide away from the fact that the neighbourhood change programme that took place last year has significantly impacted the police community support officer resource that we've been able to dedicate to Fenland. I now have 3 police community support officers covering Fenland, and that's 4 market towns and all the villages. And ultimately, it was a piece of work before that the community support officers used to spend significant parts of their time engaging with the primary school children and working with them and building those relationships from a very early age. And that's really, really hard to actually say we don't have the resource to go into these primary schools, because I'm a big believer in social mobility and the impact of social mobility and how that can influence and shape a young person's life. So I've come from a background where I've worked with police cadets and special educational needs children. So personally, it's a real passion of mine to work with young children. I look at the piece of work, the excellent piece of work that PC Kurt Allen did in Chatteris around Operation Elkhart, and how he turned young people's views of police on their head by working really, really closely with a number of agencies, but over a slow but consistent period of time, building relationships with these young people. And that saw a dramatic reduction in calls for service in relation to ASB. And he was able to think broader. And this is a model that I'm really, really keen for all the PCs in my team to start thinking like that, think about funding opportunities, to start thinking about that, yes, they are police officers, but there's a lot more to their role than enforcement. And we're starting to really change mindsets about how they police. And what I mean by that is what Kurt's done in Chatteris, I really want that to be replicated across the other 4 market towns, in Wisbech, in March, in Whittlesea. And now I've got the resources. Whittlesea has again got its own Kurt Allen, so to speak. And I'd really like to think that what he's done is going to be replicated in the very near future across those market towns, and they will always have my support to go out there and make decisions, to think about how they can change their community for the better, and really start to just think a bit differently about how to get these young people engaged. So for me, it's a real passion, and it's something that I'm really, really keen for them to focus on.
Thank you very much for that. My next question relates to an item that was raised about a year ago, and that's the, shall we say, modified cars with their rather loud exhausts. And apparently there was the equipment within the police force to actually monitor and actually deal with this problem throughout the area. Where are we with that at the moment?
Yeah, we still have that. That one piece of equipment is shared between 2 neighbourhoods. That's shared between Fenland and Peterborough. But as long as this comment doesn't leave the room, we keep it in our office in Fenland, and we try and hide it away from Peterborough as much as we possibly can. So the neighbourhood policing teams will use that piece of equipment as much as they possibly can. So again, it's intelligence led. If we're getting the complaints that the cars are meeting at X location, or there is a specific time that this is ongoing, and you perhaps say it's all the time, most evenings, they will focus their attention. So again, if we've got a specific problem at a specific location, I'm really happy that that's fed to me, and I feed that down to the team to go and do something about that. So the equipment is there, the resource is there. If the problem's there, then we'll try and fix it.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Councillor Booth, next, I think.
Thank you, Chair. I've been informed that the PCC's now agreed to fund effectively a problem-solving coordinator for Finland. It's apparently quite hot off the press, and it will be for 3 years to, I guess, enhance the work of the safety partnership. So I just wonder how we're going to sort of, I suppose, recruit that and get that role up and running. But also understand PCC's looking at putting a pot for community schemes to be available, and how can we make sure that we get our fair share in Finland, because it's a pot for the whole of the county as far as I'm aware. So let's not lose the opportunity to use that. So could you comment on that?
Thanks, Councillor Booth, for the question. So in relation to the coordinator, that goes back to the previous discussion linked to Councillor Hayes' comments relating to the PCC funding. So we have received funding for the next 3 years, and part of that is to recruit resource. And on top of the existing resource that we've already got, which was linked to the previous funding arrangement that we had, we can now go out and recruit a post for 3 days a week with residual resource, which we are actively just about to start in the next week or so. And so that advert will be out for people to apply for that post. So that's great news in terms of from that perspective. And also there is an additional PCC Communities Fund, as you've alluded to in your question, and we've already set up a working party for the CSP, a subgroup, to look at that fund. The guidance, I don't think, has come out at the end of last week. We're still awaiting the final guidance, but we have got some running ideas that, as and when they're getting the guidance comes out, we can then look at that and target some focused bids, because we would share exactly what you've just said.
I guess the other point is, don't forget to engage with town and parish councils on this, because they might well know, groups, organisations within their area that could help with schemes. And also, I think, maybe a higher presence at events such as Golden Age fairs, that type of thing, would be really good, particularly to get feedback from the community and what they think their priorities are. And I'm sure you'll get the message about road safety there. So,
yeah, thanks for that feedback, particularly the idea around engaging with the town and parish councils on the fund. That's something that I'm sure we can take away and have a think about how we can do that.
Once we've got the correct definition of how that money can. We're just waiting for confirmation on how we can get that, how that fund has to be used, because it's only it's a very small set, like you can only bid for up to a certain amount of money, and it has to be for a specific thing. And we're just getting the correct definition of what that specific thing is, and then maybe we'll be able to share that back with this committee.
Councillor Carey, please. Sorry.
could I just say, and also town parish councils, yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Carey.
Thank you, Chair. Two separate issues, if I may. The first one was returning to the big bore source. We had a response that it was intelligence led. If you knew of a meeting, etc., where you turned up and they were all there revving their engines, you'd be able to do something. This question is about a complaint I had from a resident who reported a large boring scores type thing to the police, and he felt that he was not looked after very well. So I'd just like to check, considering that a registration number was given on that occasion, would it be acceptable or normal practice for you to actually look up where the person lives, go around, visit, please start your car engine, and let's have a listen, and then warn them if they take it on the road, they will be prosecuted, rather than wait for the very minuscule chance of a police officer with a piece of equipment being about when the person drives past on the road, catching them that way. So I'm just wondering what you would believe would be the normal process.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. The response that we give has to be, without using cliches, proportionate, but at the same time, if the issue is having such a detrimental impact on that member of your community, then I don't think it would be unreasonable to ask one of the local officers to go and visit the perpetrator, so to speak, because again, I'm a big believer that if we can be proactive, we will. In terms of the response at the time, I can only assume that the call was initially triaged and it was just met with a threshold that we don't have the officers to respond to it. Ordinarily, if the neighbourhood team were on duty, it would probably have been something that they've picked up. And that is quite simply, I use the phrase luck of the draw. If the team are on duty, they are likely to get a response from a neighbourhood officer. If they are not on duty, the response officers ordinarily would not go to that type of incident because it's assessed on threat, harm and risk, and something like that would be low threat, harm and risk. So it's unfortunately it's probably common that they're not getting a response unless the neighbourhood team are on duty. But what I do expect the team to be doing when they are on duty is reviewing calls for service in our areas during the period of times they've been off duty, having a look at the incidents and thinking, is there anything we can do to retrospectively support people here? And I'm confident that they do that. But if we're getting complaints that they're not doing that and there's a specific individual that we need to help, I think, yes, we can support them and we should be going to support them. Again, it goes back to my point earlier. We might not be able to do anything, but at the very least, we can make them feel listened to and explain why we're not doing something. Because, yeah, the offence of that would have to take place on a public road rather than their own private land. But at the same time, if we are going around to their premise and talking to them, then again, that's doing something. And I would hope that that member of the public would feel more valued. And I go to the point of, if we can do something like that, they could call us for something. They could call us again because they have confidence in doing so. Whereas they might see something in the future, and because we've not responded to them in the past, they might think, I'm not going to bother calling the police now. They're not going to do anything about it. So it's kind of twofold for me. If we can build the relationship by responding to that initial incident, I'm really confident that these people will have the confidence to report other matters in the future as well.
Thank you for that response, and I think that was really right. I would say that in future, I mean, when the person mentioned this car, everybody in the room knew the car by description. He was the only one that had the number plate, but we went, oh yes, it's that white one, isn't it? Because it was such a distraction. But if in this case we heard that he wasn't, nothing was done, and then we kept seeing the car, repeated reporting and perhaps highlighting it might get some action along them lines. Second point, if I may, Chair, just some useful information I'm going to throw out there, and I hope it's useful. I don't know if it will be, but a year ago, the County Council, we introduced a community capital scheme, £5 million for use across the whole of the county. And it needed match funding. It was open to just about any organisation that had a very loose brief. If it improved people's lives, it would be in with a chance. Right? A lot of schemes across a lot of the area. March had some money for the parks. It had some money for Estover Fields, some money for the rugby club, and other areas were successful in match funding bits of that. There's no reason, in my opinion, under the old criteria, that if it's successful on Tuesday, the new joint administration are planning to replicate what the Conservatives thought of and introduced last year. If that goes through on Tuesday, there will be a new £5 million capital fund pot. It's there. They're proposing it. They've got the votes, so I see no reason why it won't. The only difference will be whether they change the criteria or not. So I see no reason under the old criteria, I may be wrong, why safety schemes wouldn't be there up alongside sports schemes, up along health schemes. The basic premise behind the pot was the health determinants for people. Things like your doctors and NHS are not as high as your working environment. Have you got a job? Do you live in a good house? Your environment, it's actually the NHS fixes things that are broken. The other things stop them breaking, and that's why we introduced it, and it looks like it's going to happen again. So bear that in mind when you put some bids together, and I would suggest act fast if you do have something in your mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kate. We'll all abide by that. Thank you. If there are no more comments, I'd like to thank everybody. I'm sorry.
Yeah, one more. Just regarding loan sharks, it looks like a lot of work's been taking place, I think, with year 6 students. My question is, are they actively targeted by loan sharks, and why are we sort of looking at that year group? Because my financial services background, I would have thought it would have been sort of probably teenagers upwards that they would have targeted. So just curious why we're sort of targeting that group.
Yeah, I think the rationale around that was it was a bid that we secured funding from the illegal money lending team. So by way of background, it was something at each partnership meeting, the partnership was saying, what do you think the issues are coming out of the COVID situation? At the time, there was a lot of concern about economic hardship, and which creates an environment for the illegal money operations to come into areas. So it was something on the back of that. And what it was, in terms of talking with the national team for tackling illegal money lending, it was felt engagement through the schools was a good way, because similar to recycling, actually, a lot of the recycling is done in the schools, and you get, and then they go home to speak to the parents, guardians, etc. in terms of, oh, we learned this, be aware of it, and it just raises that awareness through that. So and it was also then around, obviously, as they get older, they're aware of that subject as they move into older years. So that was the background behind it, and based on really talking to the national team, which came along to the community sector partnership to give a presentation on what seemed to be working out and about on the patch.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's useful. So it's the old kids nag factor, I think, it's what they sometimes refer it to.
Alongside that, though, there was also a lot of publicity, and there was also a lot of banners around, put everywhere. So it became sort of a big, everybody could see it, everybody knew it was going on. It was all over Facebook. It was pretty much everywhere. So it actually raised the profile quite highly. So.
Have you? Dan?
So, apologies, Chairman. And that does link back to Councillor Hayes' query about the RAG rating early on, because it did link to that specific project, because we do want to, for legacy from that, we want to try and build on that with another project. And actually, I found the answer whilst that's been going on. So I've had my damn moment. And the first one is in fact green, the second two are amber at the minute, Councillor Hayes.
Yeah, so final question is just regarding, in the pack, it talks about working with a credit union around loan sharks and the likes. I thought we already had an arrangement, wasn't it, with the Rainbow Credit Union? So what's happened with that? Why are we looking for a new credit union?
Sadly, the Rainbow Credit Union is no more, and so that's why we're looking at a wider credit union, because of the impact of that one closing.
Well, thank you very much all. We had a very in-depth discussion on various points, and my thanks particularly to our guests today for being here. And the partnership report is noted. Thank you. If we can proceed to item 8, please, Wisbech Rail update. My pleasure to welcome Roland Potter here today, and also Councillor Christie. Roland, would you like to give us a little bit of an update on what's going on, please?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Roland Potter, Head of Transport for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. Happy to be here today. In the interest of time, because I know time is precious for you all, I'm happy to go through the paper, or I'm equally happy just to go straight to questions. I'll take reference from the Chair.
Thank you. We have a question from Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've obviously read the update in the pack. I guess the point or the information that's missing there is timescales for, I guess, we know that there's paper going to the board in March, but, you know, obviously it looks like more research needs to be done or a business case put together. How long will that take place? You know, when will we see a West Beach Rail project? I mean, this was first discussed, I think, when I was first elected many years ago, so over 10 years ago now. So, you know, well, yeah, I don't know. So if you can give some more context around timing.
I'll do my best, Councillor. Thank you for the question. I appreciate and understand the frustration that's the time that's taken. However, heavy rail schemes are challenging in terms of time, full stop. Certainly reopening a rail scheme that that is classed as out of use as opposed to disused seems to create greater challenges along that route, unfortunately. We would hope it didn't, but it does. You'll be aware that we progressed a detailed business case for heavy rail, and we challenged Network Rail and DFT in relation to that principle in a very highly engineered business case. And that was primarily because the previous notification we'd received from the DFT was that it would have to be a third-party scheme, progressed as a third-party scheme, and there was no involvement from DFT or Network Rail or ORR, Office of Rail Regulation, in that process. But we drove through, we put a case forward, we believe that case to be strong, albeit we understood that there were elements within it, such as the road solutions over the crossings, because we'd been given clear direction that those crossings couldn't be reopened as at-grade crossings. So there was a significant figure in the overall 230 million estimate that related to those road crossings and risks. We did put a very strong submission into the DFT for their Restoring Railways Fund scheme at the time. And at the time, they were looking for small-scale early business case, innovative ideas. But irrespective of that, we still pushed forward and we drove forwards and had lengthy debate with DFT's Restoring Railways Fund team. Office of Rail Regulation became involved within that process as well, which was really positive. And also the Department for Transport, and that transpired with a meeting with Chris Heaton-Harris, who was the Rail Minister at the time. He's recently departed that role, and there's a new Rail Minister, and we will be engaging with her, I'm sure, shortly. We were rejected from the Restoring Railways Fund application in that process on a number of grounds, really. I think possibly the cost estimate was beyond the funding envelope that they had envisaged at that time for those sort of schemes. And equally, our proposal suggested 2 trains per hour from Wisbech to Cambridge, and that was dependent on capacity at Ely. We believed that that capacity existed at that time. It did drive Network Rail to provide evidence that they believe it doesn't have that capacity at this moment in time, and that the Ely area capacity enhancements work that we had previously funded the strategic outline business case for, which is now being delivered by Network Rail on behalf of DFT with funding for the outline business case. And I'm on that project board, and I'm also the task force chair for Ely area capacity enhancements. The minister's letter to us advised us that we could continue developing a third-party scheme if we wish to do so, but the DFT would review the capacity potential of Wisbech to Cambridge direct services once the capacity at Ely area capacity enhancement, Ely North, had been resolved towards the, I think it's towards the mid-end of this year, effectively. Through the positive engagement that we've had with Network Rail, DFT, and particularly ORR, we came back to board and said we need some money to get the next stage, because when we went through the business case originally, there was no engagement with Network Rail or ORR, and GRIP process that they have, which is their project control framework process, has a section called 3, and it's in 3A, 3B, 3C. We opted to do a 3B, and that's the technical build-up. The 3C is effectively when Network Rail technically review that stage and give their recommendations or their advice back. So the piece of work that we funded was for Network Rail predominantly to review that business case. There were some challenges about, well, we'd gone direct for heavy rail and we discounted light rail fairly early on, and there needed to be some more evidence or review of light rail options. So we've had we were hoping to come to board in January, but we've had a slight delay in the reports coming back to us. So we've had one report back, which is a technical report and summary of our business case and recommendations in terms of how to progress it. And then there's another report which is based on demand modelling. What does demand look like? How profitable, commercially deliverable would it be? And we're waiting for that report. I think we may have just received it, or we're on the verge of receiving that. And it is our intention, therefore, to come back to Transport Committee and Board in March. I realise that our board is in the immediate start of the pre-election period, but we feel that this is business as usual and shouldn't therefore delay a presentation. In terms of your question about programme, if we get approval for next steps proposals, I'm expecting, and we're still developing this, so this, I'm expecting that there will be a recommendation for a next stage, which will be a refinement of the business case based on the advice that we've been given. And that will then almost definitely lead us into consultation. So that will be public consultation, elected member consultation. And I would expect that it would almost definitely be consideration of light rail of some variant and the heavy rail proposal and the opportunities and challenges that they bring and the potential programme for delivery. One would hope that that business case, because we did such an extensive business case for the heavy rail, would actually be quite a speedy process, so not the normal year, 18 months or whatever that one would expect. So I would expect it to be months and maybe 6 months at the most, because there's a consultation period within it. But I hope that answers the question.
And just come back. Yeah, so you talked about the heavy rail versus light rail, and I believe there was something in the press fairly recently about the mayor sort of looking at light rail was it Manchester, I believe. So what's the difference between heavy and light rail? Is it just basically freight, or is it a bit more complicated than that?
Yeah, so it's more complicated than that. There are a variety of potential options. Heavy rail is your traditional heavy rail passenger train that can run on the main lines and with freight, etc. So it's got, I suppose it's the element of safety associated with its weight and design as much as anything else. A light rail solution is generally, it has to be considered the safety elements of it then travelling on the heavy rail route in service with heavy rail trains around it, as it were. Now, there are a variety of options that could be considered or need to be considered, and that's what I expect to bring back in a business case with an options appraisal report that would go out to consultation.
Would it be correct to say that the infrastructure you'd need for heavy or light rail would almost be the same in essence with what you're saying there, or is there a slight difference?
There is a difference. In terms of cost, there are significant differences. Our £230 million estimate for the heavy rail was very heavily engineered, and it was deliberately done so because we wanted to ensure that we could run heavy rail trains on that route, but it would have meant significant upgrade of the current track bed and track and drainage system alongside. And we also proposed in the routes that there was segregated cycling and walking alongside it, which is unusual and rare for a rail, but we thought actually that's quite a decent thing to do in the process of doing this if the land is available to do so. The main problem with the heavy rail is crossings, because your crossings are, there is a greater risk with heavy rail interaction with road. So this is why we had been told previously you can't reopen those crossings. There are technical challenges in relation to an out of use status as opposed to a disused status, and we did we played within the grey areas, if you like, there with Network Rail and ARA. But that's why we had to have the road crossing solutions for heavy rail. There is a possibility with a heavy rail solution that we might be able to do barrier crossings in certain locations, but full barrier crossings. The difference with light rail is that the crossings don't have to be as significant in that sense. You can go with half barriers depending on the light rail, or you can even go with a traffic light system depending on the system that's used. Light rail as well could potentially go on a refurbished track as opposed to a fully reconfigured track. The challenges with the various options are whether a shuttle service from Wisbech to March is the option for a period of time whilst Ely is resolved or not resolved, but to get the connectivity to the main line effectively and run a timetable service which matches the timetable service that exists at March. Whether there's an option that then could go onto the main line and through Cambridge should Ely capacity become available, and that's an option. But again, what we need to be presenting is, in the variety of options that are out there, is the feasibility, the affordability and the deliverability of the option, as well as the programme of speed of delivery. Because the question will be, do the people of Wisbech wish to have the connectivity to March in a shuttle service that gets them connected to the wider network and then on and beyond? And it's not just about going to Cambridge or to Peterborough. Actually, it's the rest of the country, London, Europe by train, or even, you know, I want to go on holiday, I get to Wisbech, I get to March, I can go to Stansted or I can go to Birmingham, and I don't need to rely on a car, etc., to be able to do that, which is not the situation at the moment. So there will be some questions, and I think it's only right and proper that at some point we're going to come and ask the people of Wisbech and March and Fenland generally what they would like, and the understanding the challenges and opportunities of both. And we will need to be honest about, you know, how any one of those solutions may or may not be able to be funded.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you. We've met usually over Zoom. What are you looking at as a timescale to come back to us to be able to give us a definitive update of where we are? Because we like people to come to us and give us answers to questions, as you've just quite extensively answered, Councillor Booth. So we need to understand where we are, because our council parishioners and constituents ask us these questions all the time, and at the moment we can't give them an answer. So we need to know what timescale you are looking at to be able to give us answers, so that we can give answers to our constituents.
I'm happy to come and see you immediately after our papers are published. If you're next, I don't know when your next committee is, but I'm happy once I've got more detail, and you know, respectfully, we're still building up that detail. So we're talking about a committee, Transport and Infrastructure Committee in early March, then a board in late March. It's really.
Councillor C. Thank
you. Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to sort of reiterate that, but as soon as the paper, we see the papers, which is in March, well, hopefully it will be in March, then I'd be very happy to circulate the details to the committee, but also to members in general. So there is a wide understanding of what we're trying to achieve.
That'd be excellent. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Councillor Cohn, by the way.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for joining us today, Roland and Chris. And nice to see you, Roland. It's been a little while, but good to see you. A little bit disappointed about the update. Got to be honest, because we get the paperwork, read the paperwork. It's very short, very brief, 2 pages long, and absolutely the subject of light rail is not in it. All right, it talks about GRIP 3B. It talks about the case for heavy rail being made, being established, and then it talks about options for the future might be to reduce costs and barriers. So unless Councillor Booth had cracked open the debate on light rail, and this debate did open with there is no presentation unless you've got questions. So unless we went down a certain direction, the actual presentation to us did not mention the fact that light rail was really firmly on the table. And I say it's firmly on the table because the Mayor is quoted as being an advocate on this. And there are many quotes under your name, Roland, that go underneath this. So why it didn't start off in what I would regard as a more honest and open way to tackle this subject, I'm not really sure, but we're on it now. Some of the questions I've got is, it seems to be that there is this old piece of paperwork that talks about heavy rail, that was definitely we're going to have heavy rail. And then there's this new vision from the Mayor about light rail. But there is also hovering in the winds, innovative new mass rapid transport technology. And some of the differences we've established would be the running of heavy goods. So if it's heavy rail, you can run that, you can't on light rail. And there's also a quote saying it'd be the death of the incinerator if heavy rail is ruled out. So many people would probably welcome that particular element. But there's nothing been mentioned about other alternative innovative means. And I think you said that later on, we've got to have a conversation with the people once this paper comes back. It's a shame that we aren't already saying that there might be other options explored, because I think that earlier, is it on the radar or not? And if it is on the radar, I know that the line between Wisbech, whilst heavy rail has been favoured for many years, there are communities, Bakedale, Friday Bridge, Coldham, all sit alongside that railway track, and a shuttle that could service them is totally different to an end-to-end Wisbech rail heavy goods vehicle. So there might be some people that say, yeah, I'd rather have this and I'd have this now. But what I'm scared about is the next paper comes back. It talks about things that may or may not happen to heavy rail. It talks about Ely capacity studies. It doesn't give us anything to hang our hat on, either one way or another. Can you have a light rail within the next 1, 2, 4, 7 years? Can you have a heavy rail in the next 10, 20, 30 years? Is it an innovative mass rapid transport system that could be automated and pick up whichever village you're on, or what? And we just go from one study to another, and we don't seem to be making progress. I would like to ask, really, we have a Mayor. What is his position? We've read the report that he's thinking about it. And I'd also like to highlight the levelling up agenda. If we cannot get the message across to the Mayor and to government that bringing Wisbech into better communications with the rest of Finland and the rest of the UK, we will never solve the issues there. That is the #1 priority for us, is to put them within easy reach of better paid jobs, etc. So yeah, the big question is, where is the Mayor on this, and what is the likelihood that we'll get a third option? So we've talked about heavy rail, light rail, innovative new project, etc. Those are questions I'd like answered.
Councillor Count, it's lovely to see you too as well. And I take on board your points about depth of detail, and certainly we'll try to do better for this committee in the future. In relation to the Mayor, I can't speak for the Mayor. The Mayor has made some statements which you referred to. I think you've equally referred to some statements that may have been made in my name. But equally, you will know, Councillor Count, from previous meetings that I've sat in, that I won't predetermine the outcome of a review or a study or a business case. It is my intention, and has been my intention for several years now, to get that connectivity for the people of Wisbech, and that still remains my passion, and I will drive it. In terms of the detail in this paper, when this paper was written and submitted, we didn't have the reports back from Network Rail in terms of what we needed to do or look at in terms of light rail, very light rail, and a variety of solutions. I can't see at this moment in time an automated hub system, as you suggest, that could stop at those various points. But that's not to say a very light rail system couldn't stop at those various points. And it's not to say there couldn't be a technology introduced that had a on-demand stopping effectively for the driver to be able to stop at those points. But all of that would need to be looked at within the design of and what the option could or could not be proposed as going forwards. There will without doubt be different financial challenges to different options, and there are widely known technologies out there being developed and funded by government that go down from heavy rail and new hydrogen trains and all of those sort of things, all the way down through light rail tram train with its overhead network that's required to power it, through down to very light rail like the Cobb tram solution we'll see, or Revolution very light rail, which is effectively looks and feels like a train in all intents and purposes, but from the difference of light rail and heavy rail has potential safety risks attached to it in terms of interaction with heavy rail. So it would purely be a shuttle service. And within all of this, we need to define what the modelling says in terms of the commercial viability of a shuttle-only service. Now, in the heavy rail business case, we proposed that there was a viability for a shuttle-only service for 10 years before it commercially viable for 10 years. But that was on a case of a heavy rail solution, which cost considerably more than a light rail solution would cost. So the difference might be considerable. The other thing, of course, is that when the rail line, and there is other network rail proposals for the line between Peterborough and Ely, which changes the ability and capacity, and that's digitisation of the signalling and potentially more crossing changes, such as the one at Kingsdyke, which I know that you're intimately aware of. But in terms of detail, I'm trying to give as much detail as I can at this moment in time, but we're still working up a lot of that detail. So that's why the paper will go to the board with as much detail as we can give, with the ask for the funding that we believe we need to put more detail into that we can then come out more widely to yourselves and the general public. So my apologies, I can't give you more at this moment in time.
Thank you very much for that, Roland, and very comprehensive. And I know that, like many of us, you fought passionately to try and deliver a solution. It just seems to always be out the grass. Whilst I've got you here, I can only, on an associated note, say that any business case for Wisbech Trail would be aided by early and late trains servicing March, which was a passion of James and myself and many other people. It's abhorrent to me to the fact that we cannot access Stansted airplanes, which is on a direct route to March, because the early trains that get you there on time, you cannot get a train back the week later, etc., etc. People can't work in Cambridge because if there's an afternoon to do, or the 12-hour shifts at Addenbrooke's, they cannot access those jobs by rail because the early and late trains don't exist. Massive conversations with Network Rail that unfortunately, despite the best weather in the world, yourself included, never came to anything. I was wondering if the Mayor is keeping those conversations ongoing and whether there's any progress, because I can assure you it's really important for this neck of the woods to get those earlier and later trains.
I can assure you, Councillor Count, that I'm engaged with not only Network Rail, but the train operating companies as well. One of the things that I introduced during the last Mayor's period of engagement was that I brought together the train operating companies that come through our routes to look at that challenge, to look at the hourly service challenges, etc. as well. You will also see within our bus services improvement plan our plan is about connectivity of rural to village, village to market town to city, cross-city solution. And that has to be connectivity to the railway lines, and that has to be services that serve for the times and periods that people want to go. I can assure you that we've had recent meetings with the train company following the opening of Soane, for instance, and the passion that we have in ensuring that an hourly service comes through changes that we're jointly arguing for through Network Rail and DFT as part of the Ely service. So it is very much on our radar. There have been challenges, of course, with the pandemic and the challenges that the rail companies have had in terms of staffing and also the funding, because their contracts changed from concessions to managed contracts. So there have been challenges, but it's very much on my radar.
Councillor Cornwall, please.
Thanks. I realise that ultimately the decision, I suppose, between light rail and we try and look at something like a tram as a light rail type or a super tram. Between light rail and in fact heavy rail will be financially driven. I mean, you know, like everything else, ultimately it will be. But shouldn't we be talking now to the residents over there in Wisbech and saying, you know, what do you actually want? What use would you, in an ideal world, if you were able to access a service, what would you use it for? And because it's no use going down a route of decision making unless there's a demand for it, is there? So aren't we, you know, why aren't we doing that now?
So that's very much what will be part of the next stage of funding, and we do need to ask the people of Wisbech what they want and what they would use it for and how they would use it. But not only the people of Wisbech now, but the people of Wisbech for the future as well. So, and it's not just about the people of Wisbech getting out of Wisbech. It's about the attraction of Wisbech to bring people in, and that's tourism, but that's also economically, and that's also for the businesses, etc., etc. So within the consultation that we do, it will be aimed at the wider communities and businesses, as well as the people of Wisbech now and the surrounding area. I would like to there was a mention of freight. Now, at the moment, freight is very much bulk or container freight, because palletised freight was taken off the rail many decades ago when the HGV industry sort of was seen to be much faster and cleaner, etc., etc. Palletised freight is now something that DFT are very much looking at, and it could potentially be something, whether it's light rail or heavy rail, on that route, and that's something that needs to be explored with the businesses of Wisbech as well.
Should we also perhaps not be considering a further link from, say, Wisbech to Kings Lynn, and any demands are likely to come that way? I know some people were talking about it some while ago, but for example, if you went down the light rail route and people from Kings Lynn wanted to go onto the main line, it's obviously quicker to come through that way than it is to go into Ely, and we all know the problems with the hold-ups in Ely and so on that stop everything. And actually take pressure off that side as well. Should that not be part of something within the equation to look at as
well? I would stress some caution. My focus has been Wisbech to March, and within the scope of that would remain my focus. If Fenland District Council wished to propose a study of a link from Wisbech then onto Kings Lynn, I'd happily receive it, but I would be hesitant of expanding the current scope, because I think that would just slow down the speed at which we want to progress this current challenge. That's not to say that there isn't the future potential of a link to Kings Lynn. And you're right, anybody from Kings Lynn that wants to go west, that may well be a proposed opportunity for them. But I really would, based on the first question about time, I would really want to focus on what we've got at the moment.
That's it.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I totally agree with Roland on that. I don't think we want to dilute what we're doing with Wisbech to March Rail. Has already been said, you know, it has been going on for a long time, and anything that might lengthen that process, I don't think would be good. And on the earlier point made by Councillor Cornwall about should we be going out for consultation at the moment, I think my concern there would be that until we know what is feasible, what the costs are, I think it might be setting hairs running by going for a consultation where we wouldn't know whether it was feasible or not. What they actually requested possibly wouldn't be possible. So I think that would be not right at the moment, but certainly we will be going out of consultation.
Whilst Chairman, I can understand that. It's also no use anybody producing a business case for something that nobody wants.
Just on back on that, Chairman, of course there will be options. You know, it won't be you know, take it or leave it. I mean, hopefully the paper that we see in March will show the various options that are available with the costings associated, and then we go from there. Really, Councillor Cornwall.
Councillor Wicks, please.
Mine is a very simple question. With the change from Network Rail to a publicly owned body, do you see this as providing extra challenges to be overcome?
I would suggest there is a transition that GBR need to go through, and there will be a transition from Network Rail to GBR. The principle of the GBR is to streamline and smooth their processes. We are engaged with GBR and we'll continue to be engaged with GBR. But at this moment in time, the line is in the ownership of Network Rail until GBR take it over. And so I have to look at process with Network Rail. Directly, I would hope and be optimistic that the streamlining process that is proposed with the GBR installation in fact could be of benefit to lines such as Wisbech, because I think there is the opportunity for the reopening of lines like Wisbech, connecting communities, levelling up, as Councillor Count has said, and creating access and connectivity to opportunities that individuals without a car would struggle to get to currently. So it's got to be affordable, it's got to be looking at single ticketing options, etc. And it's got to have the service that gets people to where they need to be, whether that be Peterborough, Cambridge, March, or further afield, but equally gets them back when they want to come back. So there are some complexities within it, but I don't think, I'm not looking at GBR being a negative at this moment in point. I would hope it would be more of a positive, bringing options such as this more to the fore.
There are no further comments. I'd like to thank you, Roland and Chris, for being here today. You also have many challenges in front of you, and we wish you luck with those. But your update note is actually noted. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Right, we'll move on to item number 9, the future work programme. You have that in front of you. Just a reminder again that we will meet as a committee with officers to discuss the budget before the next meeting. But looking ahead to March, we have a very heavy programme. Transformation of communications, update on CPCA growth service and impact on economic development in Fenland, commercial investment strategy, which I think should keep us occupied for most of the afternoon. Is there anything else in the future programme you'd like to see included that's not already mentioned? Alex?
Yeah, I'd like to see the offer from Roland being brought back so that we can ascertain what is actually happening, when it's happening, and I think Steve will probably back us up on that. We need to know where it's going.
We've been promised further information on that.
Yes,
That's
we have, yeah.
Gavin?
I think following discussion about road safety issues, we need to sort of make sure that's on the agenda. Now, Amy's going to be looking at a 12-month item, but it's been probably nearly a year anyway since we last had Matt here, Matt Staton here. So I'd like to sort of see what progress they are making.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Thank you. Anybody else? Steve, yes.
I'm not sure if others follow this situation. It's really.
Amy's just reminding me actually, yeah, so I was going to say for you, Dave, the commercial investment strategy has actually moved to May from March. Yes, Fred?
It is, but there's so much to depend there. And Steve's asking, is he committed to this, is he committed to that? We can focus on certain areas, we can do something, can we not? Speak to the mayor.
I'd agree, right? Well, let's invite him, see if he'll come.
Yeah, but what happens? We hear.
Yeah.
Just a sec.
Why
What
can't we
happens on
send
the
an invite?
CPA? We hear a little.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think he came to overview scrutiny. I think he came a members seminar, which obviously isn't open to the public.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just on this point about levelling up, obviously there was the announcement last week about, you know, what the government's going to be doing. I'm not sure if Finland was allocated any cash. From what I can understand, we're not one of those areas, yeah, that's sort of been particularly highlighted. So I think if we are inviting the mayor regarding that, we probably need to get some bit more background information on what levelling up from the government's perspective it is, because they've obviously announced their white paper, but I think it's lacking any specific detail on Fenland.